What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the reveal of the number 6 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the defending Super Bowl champion LA Rams. And obviously, coming in at number 6 for the defending champs, a little bit lower than some might expect. But there are some potential issues with this team that will be revealed as we dive deep into this team, but obviously a lot of strengths as well, and optimism that this team could potentially repeat as well. So it should be a fun one. The Rams are kicking off what is going to be our top tier in these power rankings of Super Bowl favorites, really. So before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor, please take a moment to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy way to really support my channel in a meaningful way. It tells YouTube that you enjoy the content and to push it out to more viewers, which I really appreciate. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the remaining top 5 teams as we finish off the series and get into the regular season. And without further ado, let's talk about the Rams and start by taking a look at this team's offseason that, there's some concerns here. Just look at the left-hand column, the amount of losses, and the right-hand column, the amount of additions. Yeah, they made some big additions there. Allen Robinson, Bobby Wagner, but that's pretty much it. And you look at the left-hand column, and it's a bunch of key players from last year and even some notable contributors towards the bottom. And on top of that, a change at offensive coordinator. Now, of course, Sean McVay is overseeing this offense. You're not too worried about it, but it's just another wrinkle here. So they will go from Kevin O'Connell to Liam Cohen, who we will talk about in just a moment when we talk more about this team's staff and scheme. But from a roster perspective, let's go down the list. Andrew Whitworth, star left tackle, retires. Austin Corbett, starting right guard, signs a big deal with the Carolina Panthers. Robert Woods, traded to the Tennessee Titans. Odell Beckham, I'm not convinced he won't be back with this team, so I'm going to put some question marks on that one. I think he'll probably re-sign here, honestly, but for now, he's not on the team. Sebastian Joseph Day signs a big deal with the Chargers. He missed some time with injuries last year, but he's a good player, not back. Von Miller, obviously, they were hoping to get him back. I think a big reason they signed Allen Robinson is they thought Von Miller was going to be back here. And when he decided to go to Buffalo, they were like, well, crap, we got to pay someone. And they kind of just said, all right, well, we'll pay Allen Robinson with that money that they were planning to allocate to Von Miller. So that was a big loss for this team for sure. They're also letting Darius Williams out the door. He signed a nice deal with Jacksonville. And even with the special teams, Johnny Hecker, a bit of a cap casualty, unable to bring him back. So those are just the big departures, and then you have some smaller names as well. Sony Michel actually played pretty well for this team last year. Their highest drafted rookie, Logan Bruce. They didn't have a first-round pick because of the Stafford trade. They didn't have a second-round pick because of the Von Miller trade. So kind of a double-dipping loss there, losing that second-round pick. They spend their first pick on a right guard, hoping to get him in to start over Austin Corbett, who was a vacated starter, and unfortunately he tears his ACL. He's not going to play. So already dealing with some injuries there. Ogbonnia Okoronkwo was a really nice rotational edge rusher. The couple of linebackers there, Troy Reeder, Kenny Young, got significant reps for this team last year. And even a guy in Dante Dion was a 4th depth piece at corner that actually played surprisingly well last year. So a very massive list of departures for the defending Super Bowl champs. And when you talk about teams being unable to repeat as Super Bowl champs, oftentimes it's because their rosters get picked apart in free agency and players that maybe otherwise may have slipped through the cracks are put into the spotlight, and you get guys like Darius Williams, Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Corbett getting those big deals that this team could no longer afford. And unfortunately, because of the way this team has operated, as I mentioned before, really spending a lot of money and giving up a lot of draft capital to put this star-studded team together, they didn't have a whole lot of resources, be it cap or draft capital, to truly improve this team either. So they do get Cam Akers, hopefully back fully healthy this year, missed most of last season, and honestly looked like a shell of himself in the playoffs. So hoping to get a healthy Cam Akers back this year. and then Allen Robinson brought over from the Bears, hoping he remembers how to play football after, coasting last season for the Bears, frankly. And then Bobby Wagner, a 32-year-old linebacker, a surefire Hall of Famer, but someone that is trending down. They paid him a lot of money. Was a bit of a surprise when they signed him. And then they bring Troy Hill back to start in the slot for them. And then just a couple of smaller additions via the draft. Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame, a running back, and Kobe Durant, who both these guys may be asked to play given the impending lack of depth that this team has. So definitely a concerning offseason. I think anybody that saw the Rams coming in at 6 might have paused a second. Not everybody, but I think a lot of people may have been like, whoa, defending champs at 6? This team has a lot of question marks as they head into the season, and they are entirely dependent right now on the stars of this team elevating a bunch of undrafted type of players, be it in year 1, 2, or 3, and depending on those guys to step up, and depending on this coaching staff to continue to be incredible, which they are, and they're a huge reason this team is in that top tier and very much in contention for the Super Bowl yet again, despite, as we'll see as we get into this roster, some pretty serious lack of depth. And for me, Sean McVay is the 3rd ranking head coach in the NFL, and it's not just his offensive coaching prowess, which I will get into. It's his leadership, and I think he is one of the best leaders, CEO type of head coaches, if you will, as far as team cohesion, creating a culture, that next man up mentality with all of these undrafted randoms, basically, that end up turning into pretty good starters here. That is part of the culture and part of the coaching. So that's all there. And I think he's just so good at relating to players and leading by example. And on top of that, really a high-level leadership trait is that ability to manage different personalities and change the way you communicate with different personalities. And he does that. And this is a star-studded roster. It's not always as simple as throw a bunch of talent out there and everything's going to click. No, he is able to manage these star players and get them to buy into the scheme and their role on the team, and allow them to thrive as superstars as well. But look no further than when they recruited and brought in Odell Beckham. At the time, he was going to be their 3rd wide receiver, and he was able to kind of communicate to Odell and get him to really be a part of this team as frankly, a role player is harsh, but he was not this team's number 1 wide receiver. So look no further than that. There's plenty of other examples of how great of a leader Sean McVay is. He was doing it from the second he came into this team as a 33-year-old, younger than some of the players on the team. So love him from a leadership aspect, but also, elite from an offensive mind as well. And his scheme is something we've talked a ton about in this series. He has created his own variation of the Kyle Shanahan wide zone play action offense that both of them learned really at the heart and core of Mike Shanahan's offense when they were both together in Washington in 2010. But since then, when Kyle went off to Cleveland, McVay in Washington, they've started to kind of form different variants of the same core offense to the point where I wouldn't even really describe these two as the same scheme, because Sean McVay, yes, leans into a wide zone stretch running game at the core of their run preference, I suppose, from a play calling perspective. And yes, will definitely allow the play action game to thrive off of those wide zone looks. That's all the heart and core of the Shanahan offense. But McVay has gotten away much more from the traditional Shanahan offense, which is 12 personnel, heavy packages, a fullback, which they don't even use here, and more evolved it into a more modern approach with 3 wide receivers, often leaning on a really good blocking receiver that can be almost a hybrid wing tight end type. Cooper Kupp here, case in point. And Yeah, it's an innovated version of the Kyle Shanahan offense. So you're going to see a lot of those core concepts with wide zone, play action shot plays, but it's done in a much different way. And because they stay in 11 personnel, they're also able to keep defenses honest in a lot more ways, force them to come out and defend from nickel packages as opposed to your base seven-man fronts. And you can also on early downs decide, you know what? They think we're going to come out and run the ball outside zone. Nope, we're actually coming out in empty. And we're going to go quick game left and right. So you will see a heavier dose of your stick, your spacing, your typical NFL quick game concepts, that's the kind of modern pro spread West Coast stuff here in the Rams offense. So that's your overarching scheme outlook here. They rank for me third in terms of pass game coaching. I think his creativeness with the play action concepts, his ability to sprinkle in some of those West Coast passing concepts makes him one of the three best offensive play callers in the league, especially from a pass game perspective. They do only rank ninth for run game coaching. It's not a slight to Sean McVay. It's more of a giving credit to some of those really innovative run game coaches, guys like Greg Roman, what we've seen from the Eagles. I think the Colts do some creative stuff in the run game. The Ravens, of course, who we just did. I do think there's more proactive, varied run games than what the Rams have, but they're still really good at coaching it and know what they want to do from a run game perspective. But definitely it's more about the passing game when you want to talk about Sean McVay's genius. And then Liam Cohen's just an extension of Sean McVay. He was here in LA for a couple of years under Sean McVay. He's one of these classic young kind of former quarterbacks. He's probably going to be a head coach in 2 years because that's kind of how it goes. If you know Sean McVay, you're probably getting a head coach offer. So really not expecting them to miss a beat with Liam Cohen. Kevin O'Connell did an excellent job, deserved his head coaching offer. And Liam Cohen, after to steal a term from our last deep dive, kind of did a college study abroad program, went to Kentucky, did a great job with Will Levis, and now coming back here as the offensive coordinator. So it'll be Sean McVay's scheme, no doubt about it. But Cohen might take some increased liberties with the offense and hopefully sprinkle in some just enough variance from what they did last year to continue evolving this offense as they've done a really good job of. And then you flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Raheem Morris is awesome. Only ranking 13th, it sounds low. There's just a lot of great defensive minds in the league right now. I wanted to have him higher, but I went down the pecking order and I was like, man, I don't think you can put him any higher than that. But he did a great job as defensive coordinator coming in last year for the Rams. They really didn't miss too much of a beat moving on from Brandon Staley. And a big part of that is he inherited Brandon Staley's scheme, which was really a unique thing. It was a really humble thing for Raheem Morris to do. A guy that's really now ran every scheme in the world. He learned early on under Monty Kiffin, who's like the godfather of Tampa 2. So he was a cover 2 guy for a long time, Raheem Morris. And that's really what we saw when he took over as the defensive coordinator for Atlanta. They did go a lot more cover 2, kind of his roots, and that was back in a couple years ago when Dan Quinn got fired. So he can run cover 2, and they ran it last year for sure too with the Rams. He sprinkled in that element of it, but he also learned under a really blitz-heavy attacking 3-4 defense from Jim Haslett in Washington. So he knows stunts, he knows fire zones, all that stuff, and then Dan Quinn, that 4-3 front, Seattle cover 3, where that obviously flamed out in Atlanta, but we know Dan Quinn's a good defensive coach, and he learned under him, and he learned that cover 3 system. So he knows everything except for the Fangio quarters-heavy split safety defense that the Rams were running. And Sean McVay asked him, hey, can you run this stuff for us? Can you add your own flavor, but keep the scheme the same? And he did it. He showed that versatility as a coach to inherit a scheme. You don't often see that, right? Usually you hire a defensive coordinator, and he's going to come in and change the defense to be his scheme. And like I said, he was really humble to say, no, you guys are doing some really great stuff here. I want to be a part of it, and I want to help elevate this group. So a great job last year. Obviously a Super Bowl defense that their defense did a great job in the playoffs and was a big part of that Super Bowl run. So, maybe another great year here. He continues to climb into the top 10 coaching rankings and can ultimately maybe get another crack as a head coach that I think he does deserve. I have absolutely no issue with Raheem Morris. I think he's awesome. So it's an excellent staff. It's one of the best in the league. And there's a lot of pressure on these guys as we now are going to take a look at this team's roster. There's a lot of pressure on these guys to elevate a lot of the depth here so that they can try and repeat, because that is the expectation here. So let's start by going through the offensive roster and the quarterback. And the Rams ranked 9th for me with Matthew Stafford, and very similar to what I said about Raheem Morris, this was a little bit lower than I thought it would come in at, but in a world where you've got Herbert and Burrow ascending and Deshaun Watson coming back, this is about as high as you can really go with the QB rankings for me. But that's not a slight to Matthew Stafford. He's great, and I was positive about his outlook coming into last season in this series, and really was optimistic that he would reestablish himself as a surefire top 10 quarterback, someone that was a clear upgrade over Goff and was going to be that step that they needed to really get into the mix as a Super Bowl team. And that all totally played out. And you definitely got to tip your cap as well, because Stafford is a streaky player. He always has been, and there was still, even in the Rams, for the Rams last year with a much better circumstance, there were 2-3 week stretches where you kind of had some reservations with Stafford. There were some ugly games in there. The Titans game comes to mind. It's not just that. Wasn't great against the Packers. He really had some moments where it was like, man, is he going to lay a stinker in the playoffs? And he didn't. He came prepared. He avoided that streakiness and put together a really epic 4-game stretch. Now, there was like one play against the Niners where he just randomly lobbed it up in the fourth quarter, and Jaquiski Tartt dropped what would have been the easiest Super Bowl clinching interception that you could have imagined. So they did dodge a bullet there. I think that is worth noting, but for the most part, an incredible playoff stretch. And now heading into year 2, there's just a big question of all right, are you getting what you had last year, which is a really great quarterback, a surefire top 10 guy who's going to have some really high-end games and potentially some streakiness? Or is being in year 2 of this offense going to provide a better baseline of consistency? So both of that is possible. Either way, you're not worried about the quarterback here. Matthew Stafford's awesome. I guess I should say that there are some potential concerns about his shoulder. It is an injury that has lingered for him going back to Detroit. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. It's been kind of kept under wraps. I guess all I'm saying is I wouldn't be stunned if this is more serious than is being let on, but I'm going to stay optimistic and say he's going to be back, good to go, healthy. If you are losing Stafford, Walford's fine. He won a playoff game against Seattle. He's got some experience. He's a capable backup, but obviously if you have a full season of John Walford, this team's done. That's pretty straightforward. So 9th at quarterback, and then top 10 in weaponry as well, ranking 8th. Now you have one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, certainly the potential to be the best in the league, with Cooper Kupp coming off potentially the most dominant wide receiver season ever, at least statistically speaking, and bringing in Allen Robinson, who's been a number 1 wide receiver everywhere he's been, but last year for the Bears really coasted and was completely checked out, was trying to avoid contact and stay healthy, and just knew it was a bad beat there in Chicago, wanted to just get to free agency and get the hell out of there, and he did, and he ended up finally choosing a good situation for him after kind of making that mistake with the Bears, going with Mitch Trubisky over Aaron Rodgers years ago when he basically could have gone either destination. So learning from his mistakes there, hoping to come here and, not necessarily be the number one wide receiver, but be in a situation where he can be his best. And him as a number 2 is definitely fascinating. The only question there is like, can he get back, really? And I'm optimistic that he can. And because it was ugly last year. He was not a good player for the Bears, and wasn't really separating, wasn't winning those contested catches, just, again, was not checked in. So you hope that's the case. All reports in camp is he's been awesome, and it's not too often you see a 29-year-old receiver with an up arrow, but here we go. There's Allen Robinson. He's the second player in this series that's a former Bear that has gone to a better situation that I actually have an up arrow on despite being up there in age. I think Allen Robinson can certainly prove to be more than a stud wide receiver and back to being more of a superstar wide receiver. And that could happen sooner rather than later. But obviously you got to revisit Cooper Kupp here, who's perfect in this offense. I talked about how, the Rams and Sean McVay evolved off of really running a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, where they want to set up those outside zones and a play action run game off of that. And Sean McVay said, we can get a power slot player that's a really good blocker. And in Cooper Kupp's case, he's a better blocker than, I don't know, a quarter of tight ends in the league. And he can also be someone that lines up anywhere at wide receiver. And it can just provide all of these matchup problems and provide, just different formation issues for teams, because Cooper Kupp is a glorified tight end a lot of the times where, yeah, it's 11 personnel, but when he's lined up right up next to the tight end in a 2-point stance and he's down blocking a defensive end, that's tight end stuff, right? So he opens up this scheme to be what it is. He's such a critical part of just the core of what they want to do. But then he's like the second best receiver in the NFL on top of that. And if you said he's just a slot receiver, he is clearly the best slot receiver in the league, but he's more than that. He can step out wide. He can win vertically over the top. He can win balls on the outside. So he is much more than that. But make no mistake about it, that is where his bread is buttered, is winning with physicality over the middle of the field and oftentimes off of the play action. So it's a lot of crossing routes. It's a lot of sitting down in zones over the middle and working with Stafford in that part of the game. The last thing I want to say about Cooper Kupp is his run after catch ability is often slept on. And I think if you want to talk about getting from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye, Cooper Kupp might have the best raw acceleration of any receiver in the league. The next time he catches a check down, or the next time he's that kind of chip blocking, leak out flat receiver on those play action boots they run, just watch those first couple steps and take awe at how quickly he hits top speed. His top speed isn't amazing, but his ability to operate in short areas is special because of how quickly he's able to accelerate. And he's big and strong and breaks a lot of tackles too. So yeah, that's Cooper Kupp. And with Devontae going to Green Bay, I think there's a pretty clear path for Cooper Kupp to repeat as the most productive receiver in all of football. So the majority of their passing game is going to be centered around these two. And I suppose I didn't even really mention how they're going to use Allen Robinson. I see Allen Robinson as the same role that Odell Beckham played last year, where he's kind of the backside read a lot of the times. So you'll see him working the sideline. If you get single coverage, he's going to run a lot of hitches, comebacks, go balls where he's really good. But he's also going to be running a lot of deep digs on the backside. So oftentimes they'll go 3-by-1, and Stafford's going to read the trip side, but come back to a deep side dig that basically shreds any kind of zone coverage. And when you're a route runner as good as Allen Robinson, you can shred man coverage as well. So that's kind of the role I see Allen Robinson playing. And that could potentially be a reason they don't bring Odell Beckham back. That's kind of a wishy-washy situation. But I will say, behind those two, it's not great. Van Jefferson's a good player. I've been a Van Jefferson stan, but I have been disappointed that he hasn't really taken that next step up. He produced last year in the role that he played. And with some of the injuries, he had a few games where he was flushed into the role as the number 2 wide receiver. So like he can play, don't get me wrong. There's teams that have much worse wide receiver 3s than Van Jefferson. But as far as the ball winning ability, the hands consistency, kind of the fine details of the position, I think there's been a little bit lacking with him. So he's a really good third piece to have. And can step in stints as a number 2 wide receiver. So I'm not necessarily worried about him. But for a team that runs a lot of 11 personnel, he's not a dominant weapon that's going to get starting playing time. And then behind him is really where I'm truly concerned. They don't have any depth here. And this is going to be a theme as we go. But Van Jefferson, who's dealing with a knee surgery that he just had, I think it was knee or foot, a guy that has dealt with injuries throughout his career, going back to Florida. If he's not able to go, or if Allen Robinson gets hurt, like, man, you're going to really crappy depth. You have Ben Skoranek, who's honestly more of a tight end here than he is a receiver. They'll play him in a lot of those Cooper Kupp roles, flexed inside as a kind of hybrid tight end piece. Incredible run blocker, and he's going to play a lot because of that. But, he's not much of a receiver. He's not fast. He doesn't have great ball skills. He's not a great route runner. So, like, they would probably have him out there as a full-time starter if anything happened to one of these guys. Tutu Atwell was just a horrible draft pick for a front office that's generally pretty damn good. I can't believe they spent a second-round pick on Tutu Atwell. It was like a fifth-round player for me. Quick dude, athletic. Maybe they can get him more involved in some gimmick touches this year, but geez, what was that all about? This dude's a twig. He's 155 pounds. He goes down the second he gets touched. He can't beat press because he's tiny. He's really not much of a receiver at all. So your fourth and fifth wide receivers, I don't even know if they can really play wide receiver. Brandon Powell's a tiny guy as well out of Florida. Jacob Harris is moving back to receiver after showing nothing at tight end, 215 pounds, couldn't put on any weight. He was not good in college. He was just more of a height, weight, speed type of prospect. You got Austin Trammell, who's a slot guy, and a couple of undrafted free agent types. So this is the weakest depth of wide receivers for and beyond that I think we've done in this series and will do. So you got to keep these guys healthy. And of course, you could probably go back and get Odell if something happened, and maybe they still will. But as we sit here right now, that's a major concern of this team. And then you got Bryson Hopkins, who I do actually put the up arrow next to. He was my number 1 tight end in that draft class, which isn't saying much. It was a really bad draft for tight ends, but a really smooth athlete. And I did actually prefer him better as a space player, more of that big slot receiver type, but a quick route runner and good after the catch dude with solid speed. And, a little bit of a different role here, more of that Gerald Everett role, where they are going to ask him to get on the move and block in those outside zones, be that kind of wing player. And that's where I think he needs to show a lot of growth to earn the trust of this staff. But as far as running routes out of that position and showing speed on crossing routes and being a decent weapon here, I think he can be a good piece in the receiving game. So excited to see what he can do, especially because, yet again, no tight end depth. You have, 2 undrafted types there, Roger Carter and Jared Pinkney, who's one of the slowest tight ends in the league out there if anything happens to these guys. Then you got a solid running back room. High expectations for Cam Akers in year 3 here, getting back fully healthy. Someone that has all of the athletic tools to be a premium receiving back in the league, but just needs to continue to weed out some of those drops, improve his route running, his pass protection. I think it's a big year for him to cement himself as a true 3-down back, where he just hasn't always had that consistency, even going back to his time at Florida State. But all the athletic tools are there for him to be a nice weapon. You got Darrell Henderson, who's more of a straight line guy. He's fine in the receiving game, but nothing special. Kyron Williams is definitely someone to keep an eye on, though, if Cam Akers doesn't really grasp the receiving game aspect of this offense. Kyron Williams would have been the best running back in this class if he wasn't 5'9", 185 pounds, and, average speed. Really good vision, and really smooth hands out of the backfield, a great route runner, a really tough pass protector. I believe in Kyron Williams. I thought he was better than a 5th-round pick. Never going to be a feature back. Probably never going to be much of a runner just because of his lack of physical tools. But his craft in the receiving game is awesome. So I think he'll at least be Cam Akers' rotational player and his backup for third downs and can play a role here in his rookie year. Also, Jake Funk, a really quick twitch dude who might have some of that as well, but they probably won't need to lean on him. So 8th for weapons, definitely a lack of depth, but a top-heavy unit that still makes them in the top 10 of a league that has a ton of good receiving weapons, as we've seen in this series. But as we get to the offensive line, I think some more concerns here. They rank 24th for me in pass protection, 22nd in run blocking. So, kind of almost a bottom third group. They do earn some benefit of the doubt. They do a really good job coaching these guys and getting them to step up. But the bodies here are just not super talented. And beyond that, the depth is the worst in the league. Sensing a theme here, right? So from left to right, they're really counting on Joseph Noteboom to continue to grow and step into Andrew Whitworth's shoes. He did it last year, and they didn't really miss a beat when he played. He was outstanding. You remember Chris Collinsworth highlighting him on primetime games because he was just locking down good pass rushers on the left side of the line. They give him a really nice contract. I'm not really worried about Joe Noteboom. There's a smaller sample size there, so you can't rank him too high. But reminds me a lot of when the Eagles paid Jordan Mailata, who in a smaller sample size looked really good. They trusted in his work ethic to continue growing. He's a guy with physical tools, and I think can be a franchise left tackle for him. So, some volatility there, but should be pretty good at left tackle. At left guard, David Edwards, pretty good player, adequate athlete, adequate strength, tough dude in the run game, and good technique in pass protection. Not the most physically imposing player, not some high-end guard or anything like that, but a good piece there at guard that you're not necessarily worried about. Brian Allen at center, I guess I would not have paid him over Austin Corbett. I think that was a mistake, honestly. I think Brian Allen is one of the worst centers in the league. He's got a lot of experience. He's a good sort of signal caller for this group and brings kind of a heartbeat on the interior. Is a really tough guy. He's kind of that underdog, undersized dude, was I think a 7th-round pick. So he really brings it in the run game, but there's only so much he can bring, right? He's smaller, he's not ultra athletic, so he's fine. He's more than fine in the run game, but honestly as a pass protector, he's pretty easy to be had, and they'll protect him with all of the play action boots that they run, these moving pockets. It helps protect him, but if they're going 3rd and long in a traditional drop back situation and a defense is able to rush more than 5 or whatever, and you leave Brian Allen one-on-one with a good rusher, more often than not, he's going to lose that matchup. So I'm not a big fan of Brian Allen. I think he's okay, but more of an asset in the run game than pass protection. And then this is where we're really getting into the benefit of the doubt territory with their right guard position, because Coleman Shelton, to most teams in the league, screams complete and utter turnstile, full-on liability, cost your team the season type of deal. This guy is almost no experience. He's undersized, just not a lot of good college or high-end pedigree or anything. A pretty classic backup lineman. They clearly like him. I think he's a solid athlete, brings some toughness in the run game, but really worried about what he's going to bring in pass protection. Look for teams to line up the Vita Veas and the Kenny Clarks of the world right in that gap between Brian Allen and Coleman Shelton and really test these guys to be able to block the bigger defensive linemen in the league. And I don't know if they can handle that. So it's a huge weakness for this team. Sure, he can get better and prove us wrong. That's part of that benefit of the doubt. But you'd be kidding yourself if you said you weren't worried about Coleman Shelton starting at right guard after Logan Bruce goes down for the year there. And I would say, well, they'll end up with a good right guard anyway because they have other options if they had that. They really don't. Maybe they can go and make a signing, but they haven't done so to this point. I mean, Bobby Evans has not played well in the NFL. Might be a slightly better pass protector, but that's not exactly an answer. Tremaine Akram was a 7th-round pick last year. Maybe he can impress, but he's really small. He's 6'2", so he's unproven. Jeremiah Colon, Jack Snyder, definitely unproven. Maybe AJ, formerly known as Alaric Jackson, could step in and be an answer there. AJ Arcuri, a 7th-round pick out of Michigan State. Like, it's brutal. Their options at right guard right now, and it's a clear potential liability for this offense. So we'll see how that plays out. And then at right tackle, you're good to go. Got Rob Havenstein, super strong dude. Just been kicking ass really since the second he came into the league. Comes from Wisconsin. They got a type, right? They got 3 Big Ten linemen here. I think Shelton was Washington, Noteboom was TCU, but they draft Arcuri out of the Big Ten, Alaric Jackson out of the Big Ten, Logan Bruce out of Wisconsin. So probably 6 out of their 9 players here are Big Ten offensive linemen. I think Rob Havenstein's success is a big part of that. So yeah, he's a mauler in the run game. Not the best athlete in the world, but he's good enough. He's got size and strength to anchor down in pass protection and good technique there. So you're definitely not worried about really the tackle situation. Should be pretty good, honestly. It's that interior group where it's potentially going to hold this group back a little bit. Now, I think they are elevated a couple spots with the run blocking by these skill players. The tight ends are fine. Higbee's a pretty good run blocker. Bryson Hopkins could play his role in the wing, but he is a question mark there. But these receivers really should be able to get after it, especially Cooper Kupp. I think the best blocking receiver in the NFL, honestly. Like, he knows the value he brings, and he does it in so many different ways. He'll do it essentially as a tight end, flexed in close. He'll do those down blocks on those play action boots where he can really knock back a defensive end. He'll do it from the perimeter on a corner. He's awesome. I think Allen Robinson is someone, this is going to be a good test for Sean McVay's coaching, because Robinson has all of the tools to be a really good run blocker, but as his career has gone on, I think he's gotten a little bit more complacent there. So this will be a good test of the scheme and getting him to buy in. He has all the talent to be a good run blocker. And then Ben Skoranek, he's going to play on early downs. Van Jefferson will rotate with him. He's awesome. Ben Skoranek, he might be trending up towards being, honestly, a Cooper Kupp level run blocker. Very similar to me of the role Alan Lazard plays for the Green Bay Packers in a very similar offense. Then we get to the running backs, 21st in the league. So Cam Akers burst onto the scene late in his rookie year, looked so freaking explosive, genuinely looked like one of the most physically talented backs in the league. Not unlike his Florida State counterpart in Dalvin Cook. It really genuinely showed that type of explosiveness when he emerged as a starter and was healthy in his rookie season. Now, a year removed from that, after an Achilles injury, after he came back late last year, really kind of rushed himself back and just was not the same. So we're just going to have to wait and see what level of explosiveness he has. The sky's the limit for Cam Akers to be a top 5, top 10 back in this league. He's just going to have to go out and take it. So I think it's all in front of him to do that. If he can stay healthy, I almost expect that he will. So a lot of optimism for him, but just has to go and earn that credit. And then Darrell Henderson's a really good backup. Kind of full speed ahead, solid vision, never fumbles, and solid speed for these outside zones. Now, you look at his kind of broken tackle percentage, the missed tackles forced, his yards after contact. It's backup caliber. I think he was 44th for broken tackles and 50th for yards after contact. So, he's a good backup running back, but you got to credit him for his kind of reliability that he brings, and was a nice piece for them when they couldn't turn to Cam Akers. So he's a good backup. Kyron, as I mentioned, more of a receiving back, does have really good vision. He can get skinny, so if it's 3rd and 5 and you want to run a draw with him, he can craft his way for a first down. Jake Funk, much more of a scat back type. And Trey Regas, maybe he'll stick around in the practice squad, bigger body dude. But yeah, not a whole lot of concerns with this running back group. Should be pretty good. And then Matthew Stafford provides a little bit of a boost with the threat of his play-action boot game. Really good on the move in that area, so you can't really crash down on him. He's got enough athleticism to sneak out, get on the move, but not a whole lot of designed running for Matthew Stafford, to say the least. That said, if he got hurt, both Walford and Perkins would open up a lot of different play calls that I think they're prepared to use to increase the floor of this run game with more mobile read option stuff. So something to keep an eye on, I suppose. And all this is going to crank out for me the number 6 ranked offense in the league, 5th for passing game, and 21st for run game. So obviously with the run game, you have a lack of high-end blocking up front. The running backs still have a little bit to prove. So yeah, it's going to be an effective run game, but kind of like last year, nothing terrifying, I would say. But the pass game should be pretty damn good. They rank 5th in the league there. Really good across the board. Pass blocking, definitely some question marks there that maybe would be the difference between them being maybe 3rd as opposed to 5th here. I think maybe they could go out and get, I don't know, like who else is like Darrell Williams. Darrell Williams wouldn't really fit the scheme, but maybe they could go find Trey Hopkins or Quentin Spain, who know this offense for the Bengals last year. Keep an eye on that as well. I don't think this team's going to get totally complacent there. But as we sit here right now, they have not done anything about that right guard spot that looks like a glaring issue. So that paired with some potential lack of depth with the weaponry, maybe keeping them out of the top 3. But just as we saw last year, this is going to be a really difficult passing game to stop. Before we move forward, I want to take a moment to tell you guys about my friends at SeatGeek. In my opinion, the best place to purchase your tickets for sporting events or concerts, whatever it may be. And now using promo code FranchiseGuy, you can save $20 on your first purchase on SeatGeek, where you'll already be getting the best user interface, the best tickets, and yeah, you'll support my channel in the process. So it's a win-win. If you're buying tickets, make sure you do it on SeatGeek. It's promo code FranchiseGuy. Save $20, support my channel, and let's get back to the video. Now let's move on to this defense, where it's another really good group. Of course, that defense was just as much as part of that Super Bowl run as the offense last year. And let's start with the defensive line, where they rank 6th, both from a pass rushing perspective and a D-line run defense perspective. And the majority of that, honestly, is Aaron Donald and the Aaron Donald effect. In fact, I give him a 100 grade, the highest of any player in this series and the highest in the league. He is the best player in football. Honestly, we should just rename the Defensive Player of the Year award the Aaron Donald Defensive Player of the Year award, because he is that good. He is that big of an impact. He is the best pass rusher in football, and he does it from the interior, where it's not as easy to get after the quarterback. Yes, it's the quickest path to the quarterback in between the tackles, because you're closer to the quarterback, but your lanes are more narrow, and it's a lot easier to draw double teams up the middle. So he's got a tougher time doing it. That's why edge rushers on a per volume basis get more pressures than interior defensive linemen, but not Aaron Donald. The dude consistently gets after the quarterback better than anybody, and he does it in so many different ways. He has a rare ability to maintain power despite only being 285 pounds. Part of that is he's only 6'1", so it's super easy for him with the quickness at his weight, paired with his height, to get off the ball and maintain really easy pad level, get up and under you, where he can land that long arm and really drive you back with that incredible raw core strength and power that he has. Then you package that with a fine-tuned pass rushing skill set where he can go to his go-to cross-chop move, a move that's been around for a while, but Aaron Donald has really made it a staple of his game and a go-to move for a lot of interior rushers, but no one does it like him. So what that means is, typically you're gonna go from the opposite shades. So say you're lined up as a 3 technique, you're gonna target that inside shoulder of the offensive lineman you're going with, and it can be from various different alignments. But what he's going to do is something that requires an immense amount of get-off, quickness, core balance, and arm strength, where he's going to take that outside arm, go all the way across, which requires really good footwork and difficult positioning. And as the lineman's trying to get their hands on him, he's going to take that arm and rip it backwards from the direction he came. And that basically forces the lineman to not only be able to get his hands on him, but that gets their footwork off balance. And that's where that arm strength comes in handy. And then, due to his core balance and his core strength, he has a free arm just hanging out here. So basically, he's got him at that point because he's ripped through, the lineman's off balance, and now he's got this arm to go, either swim over or plant that bull rush or just brush him to the side and pursue the quarterback. He's perfected it, and it's unblockable. And the fact that you can't overset for it, because if you do, he'll just go straight to the bull rush, or he'll reverse and go the other way. So you can't block him one-on-one straight up. The dude took over the Super Bowl. They probably don't win that Super Bowl without his fourth quarter performance. So the best player in football, and he makes everybody else around him better as well. So the 6th ranking here for pass rush and D-line run defense is really all about Aaron Donald and the force multiplying effect that he has. Now, the other guys here, it's not great. They kind of use Leonard Floyd to play off of that threat of Aaron Donald. He's a good player in his own right. He will win one-on-one, but not the most refined pass rushing skill set, not a ton of power, but what they will do is use that threat of Aaron Donald demanding attention and Aaron Donald's ability to blow up and distract an offensive lineman to wrap or bend Leonard Floyd in and around him. So definitely benefits from Aaron Donald, a very productive player. I think he ended up the year, if you can count playoffs, the end of the year with like 70 pressures and 14 sacks. So a highly productive player. And he's kind of their number 2 piece, and him and Donald play off each other really well because Floyd does have a lot of athletic ability and a lot of length as well. Beyond that, though, Greg Gaines, nice ascending player, quicker feet than you'd expect, can bring some power. He's a really persistent rusher. So he's a solid 3rd piece in play there. Nothing amazing, but a good year and a good underrated player that was a big part of their run last year. Opposite of Leonard Floyd on the edge, you're going to be vacating Von Miller here and replacing him with Justin Hollins, who's kind of a hybrid, preferably like a 3rd edge, who's a good run defender, but not a lot of a pass rushing skill set there. Any pass rush production he puts up is mostly going to be unblocked and on stunts, not someone that's going to win traditionally one-on-one. So that's kind of your starting 4. And then you'll bring in A'Shawn Robinson for your base 3-4 packages. He's a good player. He can get after the quarterback a little bit, so he's going to rotate with Greg Gaines. And these guys can both buy Aaron Donald some reps as well. But he's their 5th best player on that D-line, and he will play in quote-unquote base packages, but more of a run defender than a pass rusher there. And then Terrell Lewis is an interesting piece. I like Terrell Lewis. I think he can play. He's definitely a better pass rusher than Justin Hollins, but a massive injury type of dude. Was going back to Alabama. It's why he fell to the 3rd round. Hasn't always been healthy here for the Rams. And someone that I think is just always going to be on a bit of a pitch count. Maybe going to be playing banged up here and there. But a nice first step. Has some rush moves. Has some bend. If he can stay healthy, there might be some theoretical upside for him to get on the field more. They also lost Agbanya Okoronkwo, who played really well as an additional rusher, because Justin Hollins really was just an early down guy for them, and they're going to have to figure out what they want to do, losing their 2nd and 3rd best edge rushers from last year, and Terrell Lewis, I think, is honestly the only hope at that right now, unless they go out and pick up someone that gets cut or goes and makes a trade, which this team is not afraid to do. But behind Terrell Lewis, it is literally all undrafted rookies, and Chris Garrett, who was a 7th-round pick out of Concordia St. Paul, which is, I believe, D2 last year, didn't really get on the field. These 4 undrafted rookie edge guys have all been playing and competing in the preseason. Probably 2 of them will make the team, so there's definitely a chance and an opportunity for one of them to surprise, but obviously not something you're counting on there from any of those guys. It's a major concern, the edge rush opposite of Leonard Floyd right now, especially if Terrell Lewis can't stay healthy, which is pretty likely. And that's more from a pass rushing perspective. I think from a run defense point of view, they're pretty set. Like Leonard Floyd uses his length really well. He's a good enough run defender. Justin Hollins has bought into that role. He's pretty good. You've got 3 guys on the interior. So like run defense should be balanced. Pass rush is definitely a little bit contingent on Aaron Donald, which is a good baseline to have, I suppose. As far as the interior defensive line depth goes, you've got kind of a handful of these undersized hybrid end types. They're going to be kind of 4 eyes in base defense for them. And that's really Marquise Copeland, Jonah Williams, Michael Holt, and even Ernest Brown, who was a 5th-round pick last year. None of these guys have incredible upside or anything, but all will probably make the team and kind of bounce in and out of the lineup. The only other true big man they have on the interior behind A'Shawn Robinson is Bobby Brown. Was a 4th-round pick last year and is one of those guys that kind of looks the part but needed to put it all together. Really big, athletic guy. Definitely a lot of upside here. Someone I believe in, but is suspended for 6 games for PEDs. So they are going to be pretty thin as far as space eaters in the middle until Bobby Brown gets back. And then you just hope those PEDs are helping him play well, because it's not like he was great when he got on the field last year. But all in all, there's your D-line. It's Aaron Donald doing his thing, Leonard Floyd playing off of that, Greg Gaines and A'Shawn Robinson, good balanced defensive tackles, and then a rotation with Justin Hollins and Terrell Lewis, with Hollins getting the early down work and Lewis hopefully staying healthy for the pass rush stuff. And then into the middle of the defense with the linebackers. Obviously, big upgrade, bringing in Hall of Fame linebacker Bobby Wagner. Definitely trending downwards. He's 32 years old, so you're hoping he can get kind of rejuvenated here. One more chance to win a Super Bowl before he hangs up the cleats. Definitely slowing down. You're seeing him struggle to change directions a little bit more, and that kind of first step acceleration. Not quite that elite athlete that he once was, but he is now an average athlete at the position and a brilliant mind, which still gives you, a top, 8 linebacker in the NFL. Still a pretty balanced player. He's got all the size to defend the run, and he's just got such a great processor there at that position that he's going to arrive a half a step sooner than most linebackers will anyway, so that lack of speed doesn't really show up in run defense, other than maybe sideline to sideline speed. But yeah, he's great in run defense, and from a coverage perspective, that's where the athleticism will hurt him a little bit more. I think sometimes when he's trying to flip his hips and stay with those deep crossing routes that he will be asked to cover in this system, that's when you can really see his age show. But for the most part, if they're keeping him kind of hanging out around the line of scrimmage on tight ends and running backs, especially tight ends, I still think he can be a good cover player, and he's so heady at that position that I'm certainly not worried about it. I think it's still a relative strength for him. So a big signing, and this is, I think, the group that's clearly most improved from last year. And then you have Ernest Jones in year 2, and Jones certainly flashed in his rookie season. Really good blitzer as well, not really noted there on the graphic, but a really good athlete, a mid-round pick last year that fought his way up the depth chart. It's not easy for rookie linebackers, especially mid-round guys, to become starters in year 1, and his instincts and his athleticism really got him that opportunity, paired with the fact that these linebackers frankly sucked last year. But still, run diagnostics, something he's going to have to prove out over time. It's great to have a mentor like Bobby Wagner right next to him to really coach him up and get him up to speed. So the arrow's certainly pointing up for Ernest Jones. Might not be perfect here in year 2. It's just such a tough position for young linebackers, but he's definitely ascending linebacker that now pushed into a linebacker 2 situation isn't going to hurt this team quite as much as maybe if he was their only linebacker, So overall, they rank 10th for coverage, 8th for run defense. A lot of that is Bobby Wagner, but some of that is Ernest Jones and potentially him ascending as a good number 2 this year. As far as the depth goes, surprise, surprise, not a whole lot of guys worth counting on. Travin Howard's not bad, entirely undersized, kind of the what was his name? Corey Littleton mold is kind of a more safety than linebacker. And that shows in coverage. He's got good instincts. He's got quick hips to, attach on crossing routes and ins and outs and stuff. But just it holds him back in run defense. So you don't really want him as a starter, but as a backup, he can fly around and make some plays. And then really nobody else even worth talking about. It's just a bunch of undrafted types that will have to surprise if they want to be anything more than poor depth. So another thin group, but you've got a nice pair of starters there and ranking in the top 10 for linebacker room, which is massively better than last year, where I think they were like 30th in my deep dive, if not worse. Now, that said, I do think the secondary is likely a little worse than it was last year. They're making some changes here. They let Darius Williams go in free agency. He was a good number 2 corner that they're going to have to fill. And they're also going to be turning to Nick Scott, who I think is just a more high variance guy than Taylor Rapp. And we'll talk a little bit more about him, but a couple of points that are potential weaknesses in this secondary, even though you have Jalen Ramsey as your number 1 corner, who, similar to Aaron Donald, though not quite the force multiplying effect, he's going to make the rest of this group better. Because even though they're a zone-heavy system, they're able to leave him on an island. And in quarters, if you're an outside corner, more often than not, you're basically just a man coverage. So they can do a lot of stuff with Jalen Ramsey on the number 1 wide receiver that basically allows the coverage to shade towards everything else and not have to worry about Jalen Ramsey. So he does provide a force multiplying effect. He makes the job easier on everybody else here, and that's because he's the best corner in football who is a matchup-proof corner. He's one of the few corners in this league that can go like pound for pound with DK Metcalf and some of these giant receivers, DeAndre Hopkins in this division, even Deebo Samuel now. Like, he is it at corner. He is the ultimate prototype. And they almost, rely on him for this secondary because behind him, it's a pretty just mediocre group, honestly. Before I do talk about those, I do need to also mention Jalen Ramsey's impact as a run defender, where he took a new evolution to his game, where on early downs, they moved him into the slot. They said, you know what, screw putting you in off coverage and quarters defense where the outside corners can't really do a whole lot. Let's move you into the slot, play you around the line of scrimmage, and let you use that physicality and size to thump and make that impact. And man, he did. He was, I think, maybe Kwan Williams was potentially more impactful, but I think it's pretty easy to say Jalen Ramsey was the best run defending corner in the NFL last year. So he doesn't just help the coverage group, he amplifies the run defense in ways that a lot of outside corners don't even really get an opportunity to do. But like I said, behind him, it's just a lot of meh. You have Troy Hill coming back here, was a good slot corner for them. I don't have any issue with that, and potentially even better than what they had in the slot last year, where David Long was asked to play a little bit. They had Dante Dion doing it. Like, I think Troy Hill is a better player there, so that's good, but he's not some superstar. Like, Cleveland let him go for a reason. He really was just kind of a replacement level starter, if you will, as a slot corner. Good run defender. And then David Long kind of flushed back to the outside. I still like David Long. I don't know if at this point I'm counting on a breakout, but if there's a breakout candidate on this defense, it's probably him. He's a really quick guy with a ton of athletic ability, young player coming out of Michigan, now in year 3 of this system, and a clean opportunity to be an outside corner where he's not the most physical player. He really isn't. So kind of getting that Darius Williams role there's some potential there. But he's far from a perfect player. I think his route anticipation, his zone feel has left a lot to be desired as well. So kind of a wait-and-see year on David Long, and they're definitely wishy-washy on him as well. They like Robert Rochelle, did some nice stuff in his rookie season, a fourth-round pick last year with a lot of height, length, and speed. And then Kobe Durant's like the complete opposite. 5'9", not some insane athlete, is a good athlete, but he is your Darius Williams clone. And this was a pretty freaking bang-on, like ring the bell take that I had, was that I compared Kobe. I was doing a tweet series of dream day 3 fits for every team, and I had Kobe Durant as the Darius Williams replacement because he's literally Darius Williams. That's what his tape was. So they obviously saw the same thing I did with him, and if all else fails, I honestly think he could be asked to start. And it's hard to ask him to be Darius Williams in year 1, but he is that level of a player overall. I don't love him in the slot. Now, he's not a super physical player. He showed his best tape on the outside, just like Darius Williams did, despite the fact that he's only 5'9". Really good at reading the quarterback, playing off zone coverage on the perimeter, just as they'll allow him to do in this defense. So they certainly have some answers, but nobody that's proven. You also have a couple more interesting corners. You have Darian Kendrick, who is really slow, but a heady player, started 1 million games for a championship caliber defense, and in a system here where he's going to be playing a lot of off zone coverage, you can protect his lack of speed much more. Think of a Rasul Douglas in Green Bay running a very similar system, not the fastest player. And then I'm even excited for Grant Haley here, if he can make it. He is a remarkably quick-footed athlete. Not incredible size or long speed, but has shown flashes. The Giants really never trusted him, but I think he can play. The Saints picked him up after the Giants let him go. The Saints have a great eye at that position. Didn't really stick there. Great group. But another player I'm keeping an eye on there, and Grant Haley out of Penn State. So I certainly don't think they're ever going to suck in the secondary. Again, they're ranked 13th. I like the secondary quite a bit, but I would just say you have relative non-strengths opposite of Jalen Ramsey. Then into the safety group, I mentioned a little bit, but Nick Scott looks like he's going to be full on as the starter this year. And just, he's a risk taker. He plays nicely with Jordan Fuller and is just going to add some variance. Taylor Rapp is a really smart, heady player, but not a good athlete. They know it. They know that his ceiling is just very capped. And I think they want to at least see if Nick Scott can continue to play good football, because he really came out of nowhere and played well in the last, 8 games of the year last year. And honestly, by the Super Bowl, I want to say he was out snapping Taylor Rapp. So it's not anything new. It's just a small sample size. He's, I think, a 7th-round pick, if not an undrafted player, a smaller guy, not some insane athlete. So he's going to have to thread that needle with his mind and be a really smart, instinctive safety to become a good player here. He can do it, but it's not going to be easy. Similarly to what Jordan Fuller has done next to him. Fuller is one of the most secure safeties in the league. Very similar to what he was at Ohio State. A really intelligent player, keeps everything in front of him. He'll snap on routes and anticipate stuff and close gaps quickly, but not a ton of range. Not some insane man-to-man guy either. So he's not a perfect cover player, but he's not really going to blow any assignments, and he's a great communicator on the back end for a defense that requires a lot of communication with these quarters, pass-off coverages. So he's a good player. He's really good coming downhill as well. That's a part of the security element with him, is just a disciplined run defender, keeps his lane, sees everything play out, and a really secure tackler. So he's a good player, not some insane impact. Probably their second-best defensive back right now. And then Taylor Rapp, I think, will be their kind of dime safety. Come in, play around the line of scrimmage, someone that can match up on tight ends and running backs, play those more hook zones, be an instinctive guy. But yeah, I think they're looking for some more upside at that safety spot. They have some more depth at safety as well. Terrell Burgess was a 3rd-round pick out of Utah, really physical player with speed. A lot of slot corner experience, so he's a good fit for the quarters heavy system, something I've talked a lot about, those converted slot corners, flipping up top and playing quarters heavy systems. It's just a similar skill set in a lot of ways. But Quentin Lake, man, was one of my dudes in this draft. Was actually a top 10 safety for me. Most people had him as basically a 7th rounder, an undrafted guy, safety 20. But as I was ripping through all the safeties, got to him like 24, 25 safeties in the draft, and I was like, no, this guy's different. This guy really knows how to play football. Turns out he's a coach's son, really fun guy off the field. 2 days later, he's on Good Morning Football, and I'm like, this guy's going to be something. And I even said he's got to go to a team like the Rams or the Browns or the Packers, somewhere that runs this hybrid system, because he's kind of a do-it-all safety, but he doesn't have great athletic traits. One thing I really liked about him, though, a really good route anticipation and someone that snapped onto routes really quickly, which is really important from those quarters assignments. So I think he can play. I think they found something in him. And if Nick Scott fails and they don't want to go to Taylor Rapp, I really hope they give Quentin Lake an opportunity, because I think he can be, honestly, a very similar player to Jordan Fuller and a great compliment. So definitely keep an eye on Quentin Lake if he gets that opportunity. Kind of had some really good calls with this Rams secondary. I don't know if they were watching my draft videos, probably not, but I thought very like-minded with them on a lot of these late-round guys. 13th for DB coverage, 10th for DB run defense. It's a really good secondary, some potential areas of mediocrity elevated by Jalen Ramsey, straight up. So this does give you the 7th ranked defense, because you pair all that with a really good coaching staff with Raheem Morris, a team that, put together a Super Bowl run. You got great leadership, you got great players. It should really all come together and be a huge strength of this team yet again. Got to stay healthy, and I don't really want to say it, but Donald, Jalen Ramsey, these guys have had remarkable bills of health. They do an immense job of amplifying everything else around them. If anything happened to either of them, I'd be pretty worried about this defense. And you got 41 games played between those two superstars right there last year. Just let that sit in for a second. Let's get into our team recap here. We'll look at the schedule after that, and we'll be on our way. So obviously they rank 6th overall here, 6th on offense, 7th on defense. Really well-rounded team that does have to stay healthy. Their depth scares me, but you pair that with a good special teams unit. They do lose their punter, but not terribly worried about that. Good, well-distributed talent base, I suppose. But one bigger snapshot at their strengths and weaknesses. So I think coaching culture is a clear-cut strength of this team. The explosiveness they have on offense with a receiving duo and Matthew Stafford's arm and their play calling and potentially Cam Akers breaking out, should be lighting up scoreboards against weaker defenses this year for sure. Then a star-studded defense. You have in the front 7, you have an Aaron Donald who makes everybody so much better, and then you have Jalen Ramsey, who you can shade the coverage away from, which makes things easier on everybody else. So that's the real strength of this team. And then the weaknesses is a ridiculous lack of depth scattered throughout the team. Wide receiver, offensive line, edge in particular really worry me. If anybody goes down, if you lose any starters in that group, you're leaning on basically undrafted talent for the most part. So certainly worried there. And I think your offensive line is already kind of suspect from a pass protection standpoint. That right guard spot could be an absolute turnstile with Matthew Stafford running for his life. So there are some weaknesses on this team that, can certainly be something that holds this team back from a repeat performance of a Super Bowl. And, honestly, as we take a look at the team's schedule, I'll be straight up. I do not think this team repeats. I think their depth is super concerning. I think they had a remarkable run of health last year that they're going to have to sustain, and they haven't been able to replenish this roster in a significant way. So I'm definitely worried. They can do it. I have them in the kind of Super Bowl favorites tier, But at 11 to 1 odds, I just to begin the schedule outlook here, I don't think I would bet that. But their schedule is not terrible. It's funny going from AFC teams to NFC teams because the schedule just naturally looks so much easier. But it's also not like this is some cakewalk schedule either. You are in a tough division. You do have to play the AFC West. So, like, still not ideal with this schedule. They start with Buffalo. I think they will be underdogs there. Opening night, Thursday Night Football, coming up here in 2 weeks, man. I'm really starting to get that itch, man. I'm getting excited. But I do think they'll be underdogs in that one with the expectations for Buffalo. And we don't know about Matthew Stafford's health right now either. But then you've got Atlanta coming to town, at Arizona, no DeAndre Hopkins. At San Francisco is not going to be easy. I got that as a pick'em game. Have not revealed San Fran yet. Dallas coming to town. Carolina coming to town. You know, I think you look at the first 6 games before the bye week, probably looking at about a 4-2 start is pretty realistic there. And then that's where the schedule really picks up. You've got Seattle twice, so they should be able to beat Seattle both times. I wouldn't be too worried about that, though Seattle can be frisky. So that should get you to 6. And then what do we got left? 9 games that are more or less right down the middle, 50-50. Some tough road games, more than some. You got at Tampa Bay, at Kansas City, at New Orleans, at Green Bay, at LAC. Not easy games, right? So if you can split those 9 games, you know, it might come down to, do you win 4 of those or do you win 5 of those? Because I don't think they're going to have this clean run on the back end of this schedule where they're an 11 or a 12-win team. I think 11 is maybe their ceiling in some ways, maybe 12 at best. You know, win projection of 9.8 wins. It's not a team that I would bet against. I don't want to bet against Sean McVay and this team and their ability to amplify this group with all these depth pieces and some of their holes. But I'm not really comfortable betting on them to be a Super Bowl champion or an 11-win team. I think this team's got some real issues, and repeating is going to be really tough. And I'm sorry if that's a pessimistic outlook. It's not my intention here. It's just kind of my honest opinion on the Rams. I think they'll be a really good team. They'll be in the playoffs. They'll be frisky, and you got to come to play when you want to beat them. But I think there's 5 other teams in the NFL that are better than the defending champs as we head into it, even though I do have them in the top tier here. So there is my Rams deep dive. Let me know what you guys think. Have I convinced you that 6 is a good spot for the Rams? Is this too high, too low? Let me know in the comments down below. If you have made it this far and you haven't hit that like button quite yet, please do take a moment to do that. It really does help me out. I appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe while you are down there. And we'll see you in a couple more days for our next deep dive. Peace out.